Hello and welcome to Fantasy Life Show. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down an exhilarating Thursday night football matchup, as well as all of the injuries you need to know ahead of Week 5. So joining me on this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, as always, the one, the only, Dwain, The Rock McFarland. Dwain, what a Thursday night football game, man.
What a Thursday night football game, a treat for the ages, Ian. We've had so many bad ones. Like, what do Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, like, what do they think? Like, actually, seeing points scored. They've actually had a few pretty good games here this year, opposed to what we've had in the last few years. So, yeah, really nice to see that game. Man, Kirk Cousins really just starting to click. A guy that last year was off to a super hot start in fantasy. We've seen him have these top 12 finishes pretty much every year over the last 5 years with Minnesota. A lot of people kind of wrote him off. Ian was looking really good, man, like staying in the pocket, stepping up, driving the ball down the field, not trying to check stuff down, on time, really good accuracy. Like, look, we're never going to mistake Kirk Cousins for having a bazooka arm, but that timing and that accuracy together, man, makes him really great. And that's a great match with what you have with Drake London, and obviously now opening things up for Darnell Mooney, man. Darnell Mooney. And he could have even been a bigger game, Ian. We had a sheesh there.
We did have a sheesh there. Unfortunate drop in the fourth quarter. That certainly seemed like it could have been a bigger deal, but Captain Kirk and company ended up coming back just fine instead. So was funny seeing the Bears fans, in the timeline, like, oh yeah, there's the drop. That's the Darnell Mooney we all know. It's like, yeah, guys, after he caught another 9 passes for 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns, wouldn't exactly think that's the burn you might think it is. But you said it, Dwain, 509 big ones for Kirk in that 36-30 overtime victory for the Falcons. Broke Matt Ryan's single game passing record on the very night that Matt Ryan got inducted into the Falcons Ring of Honor. So, Dwain, I don't think we're necessarily expecting Cousins to be throwing the football 58 times each and every week out there, but you kind of mentioned it, man, where at a minimum, after that disaster of a Week 1 game against TJ Watt and the Steelers, where many wrote him off, yeah, at least Kirk didn't write back.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've talked about it. It's a new offense with a new coordinator. You got a quarterback coming in off of the Achilles injury that happened later in the season last year or midseason. And then he's trying to get his timing together with all these wide receivers. And when you think about stylistic play for quarterbacks, I already mentioned it, but Kirk is all about timing, anticipation. And so it can take some time to get those things ironed out. And, just the lid kind of blew off this past weekend. Obviously, these teams, when they play against the Bucs and Vita Vea is healthy, talk about someone, Ian, that really does change game plans for offensive coordinators. I'm not joking. Like, Vita Vea is up there in the same conversation from as far as making you change your game plan as Micah Parsons, TJ Watt. It's not because he's going to pressure you as a passer, but it's because, like, can you even try to run the ball up the middle? And then if all you're going to be able to do is run the ball outside, how many times are you going to run the ball? And so I think that's why you saw the Falcons really opt to go to the passing attack to try to win this game. And it's not the first time. We've seen this quite a bit over the last 2 to 3 years with Vita Vea. So major hat tip to him, man, and the force that he is on the inside, enough to make teams change their game plan. I do agree with you. I think the Falcons become a more balanced, move back to being more of a run balanced pass offense, like what we've seen from Sean McVay and his offenses over the years. That's where Zach Robinson comes from. But probably a little bit more passing. They start to open it up some. And we know that the ceiling is certainly there. Look, anytime you have, Ian, 3 weapons that can challenge the opposing defense, like, you're going to have an opportunity to hang in any game. And right now, I think we all agree, Drake London, we had him written up in the utilization report this week as a guy you got to go buy. He was on the verge of a massive breakout. We got that to come through. But really the big thing here is Darnell Mooney stepping forward to be a really good wide receiver too. We did have a Kyle Pitts sighting, as well, Ian. I don't know how much that'll last versus, well, we threw the ball over 50 times. So Kyle Pitts did manage to get, I will say, Kyle Pitts, man, first play down the seam, 32-yarder, and immediately just finds the first defender he can run into. Like, I mean, he could have just kept running straight up the middle and he tries to cut it outside. I guess he didn't see the defender. Later, he's coming on a crossing pattern and it's like he's trying to decide if he's going to juke. He just runs straight into the defender. I'm like, man, dude, for being such an athlete, like, you are not a fluid man.
It was so funny too, Dwain. Apologies to anyone that did have the under on Kyle Pitts' 31.5 receiving yard total, because that thing was on fire after the second play of the game. But hey, credit where credit's due, man. 7 catches for 88 yards for a guy that, again, coming off that goose egg. I know a lot of people rage cut or even benched out there. So good to see Pitts get back into action. And good to see Kadero Hodge, Dwain, really have, a great feel-good moment at the end with that walk-off touchdown. Check the tapes, Dwain. Every time you mention Kadero Hodge and even a slightly derogatory derogatory way I have stuck up for him over the years, okay? Yeah, that's his second career touchdown ever, I think. Yeah, he's been a career backup, but the man makes a few plays out there, and I will not stand for any Kadero Hodge slander. All that to say, though, there was one Atlanta Falcon who could not really get things going once again, and you mentioned it, Dwain. Vita Vea, a big reason why, but Bijan Robinson, man, 36 points, 550 total yards, and we still couldn't get a double-digit fantasy performance out of someone who, again, was a consensus top 5 overall pick in fantasy just a few short weeks ago. So I know, Dwain, this is where you tell us not to panic. The utilization still looks good, but come on, man. Can we get a blow-up game out of Bijan already?
Look, I get it, but people do really need to stay patient here. Like, I haven't gone to check like what trades are looking like. Obviously, after this game, a lot of times rosters lock, so we probably won't know. I'm not saying you can't ever sell Bijan Robinson, but man, I still really feel good about him, Ian. And I just want to remind people that like the way these 4-game trends work sometimes, yes, 4 games gives us a really good sample. Now we're at 5 games, for the Falcons. We get a really good general understanding. But still, you get massive swings. A lot of these people that are saying Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, oh my God, what am I doing? They're going to start scoring 20-point games, people, and everybody's going to change their mind in a few weeks. And then people will change their minds again because they'll both have a 2-game bad stretch. Like, this is the way fantasy works. I will say this. Take out week 1 when Bijan totally dominated the backfield, and let's just look at the last 4 weeks and try to be I'm trying to be sober-minded about it, right? And not just assume Bijan's going to be, this great fantasy asset. But we look at where his utilization score is now that we're sharing time, with Tyler Algier. Like, this is really your range of outcomes, okay? 29% of the time, Ian, over the last 4 years, guys, where his utilization score is at, they've been a running back 13 to 18. Not ideal. 29%, so 1 out of 3 almost. But you still got a running back 65% of the time. 26% of the time, you've had a top 6 running back. And again, guys, we're just talking about a 4-game window. This can very quickly change. I'm ranking Bijan as a top 6 running back easily the rest of the way right now. But even if we're talking about the downside, that's what you're looking at. So just be careful. That's still someone you're putting in your lineup every single week, and you got to try to figure out a way to win in other spots until you get your blow-up games from Bijan. So I know, not ideal. You hoped he was the running back 1 overall, easy slam dunk. We're not getting that right now, but I don't think that you should just, say that there's no way that we get it. Tyler Algier is probably here to stay. He's doing enough to be out there 35% of the time.
That's the key point, though, is 35% of the time. It's not all of a sudden this 1A, 1B situation. Still Bijan's show, and to his credit, he honestly had a couple really nice runs later in that game, breaking multiple tackles, picking up a lot of yards after contact. Just, again, maybe not the 90% workhorse CMC-esque role that certain people looking at you, Raheem Morris, may or may not have promised us during the offseason. But even with as bad as things have been, only 1 touchdown through the first 5 games, Bijan did finish as a top 24 running back in each of the first 4 weeks of the season. So not the worst floor in the world, Dwain. Hopefully we get that, again, patented blow-up performance here soon. Do you want to shout out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing. These defenses, man, like the more and more you get to watch them, and I've been trying to go back and watch these wide zone teams whenever I get, through the first couple of days of the week, and you actually have some time to watch some more film. And, man, there are so many of these teams now using that 6-1 front. And it's a copycat league, right? This is what happened. The Bears did it to the Rams. How many years ago was that, Ian? The year that the Rams went to the Super Bowl? 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. And then what the Patriots do? They copied it in the Super Bowl and completely shut down the Rams' run offense. Well, then it kind of got revived in that game where we saw the Eagles come out and do that to the Saints after the Saints were just lighting everyone up. Well, right out of the gate, you saw that 6-1 front against this wide zone for the Falcons. So when it's in a game where they know the game script's there for them to run, like they're just trying to tell them, we're not going to let you run this wide zone. So it's really just an interesting thing to keep an eye on across the league, because a lot of these running backs, that play in the wide zone, they've enjoyed, man. Like, if you've got good vision, man, it's really hard to stop because you're going wide, then you got your second cut, and then you got your total cutback lane. And these teams are taking that away with this front. So it's kind of a thing taking over the NFL right now.
And I will say, I believe I saw Brett Coleman, who obviously does great work on YouTube and is a fun Twitter follow as well, note that the overwhelming majority of Falcons run plays have been of the wide zone variety. So maybe mix things a little bit up there. Zach Robinson certainly can't hurt a run game that, let's face it, hasn't been overly efficient thus far. But just want to give a quick shout out to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because it takes 2 to tango when you do have a shootout like this. Baker Mayfield, 3 touchdowns in the first half. He now only trails Dak and Jordan Love in terms of 3 touchdown passing performances since week 1 of last season. Also did see Rachaad White while he's playing through the pain rip off at least one big play out there. Bucky Irving still splitting time, did have that unfortunate late game fumble, but was already back out there on the next drive. Certainly doesn't appear to be doghoused. 2 touchdowns from Mike Evans, also got his 100th career touchdown, so great job, Mike. Threw the ball to a guy in the stands wearing a Mike Evans jersey. Talk about an S-tier life moment, Dwain, wearing an Evans jersey to the game and then catching the guy's freaking 100th touchdown in the stands. And also Chris Godwin, another game where we did at least see him go out there and catch 5 passes on 6 targets. So great Thursday night game. We thank you for your service, Falcons and Buccaneers. But with that, guys, we are turning our attention to the rest of the week 5 slate right after this word from our friends over at New Era. What's up, fantasy football fanatics? There's a new era at FantasyLife, and you can gear up for kickoff with the official cap of NFL sidelines from New Era Cap. This weekend's matchups are packed with fantasy implications. No matter which stars or teams you are backing, New Era has the gear you will need to keep you in the game. From classic fitted caps to iconic snapbacks, New Era's premium designs and comfort let you showcase your team pride and style. Elevate your game day look now with the official cap of NFL sidelines from New Era Cap. How to get the Seahawks one for that one, Dwain. Shout out Kendall, K-Dog, holding it down for us here at FantasyLife. But yeah, man, let's get into the week of injuries. Certainly have a lot to get to. So as always, guys, we invite you to check out our consensus rankings over at FantasyLife.com. We'll be baking all this information into those ranks throughout the weekend. But Dwain, we'll start with the guys under center, and specifically one who seemed like he was probably going to be out this week when it started, but now I'm not so sure. Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson, limited back-to-back days to start the week with that oblique injury. Feel like he's probably going to be under center this Sunday against the Jaguars, Dwayne.
Yeah, and you've got a really good matchup against the Jaguars, but it makes it a little bit tricky because you worry about Anthony Richardson re-injuring himself. Like if I knew Anthony Richardson was completely healthy and was going to be out there, or Joe Flacco for that matter, like I would feel pretty decent about them in fantasy. Obviously, Richardson is the guy I would rather have out there, but if he was like, say, 100%, no doubt about it, this week against the Jaguars, who've been absolutely one of the best matchups, to play against for quarterbacks, 284 yards allowed per game, I would have Richardson probably as my QB 6 or 7. But because of the injury and the potential for him to re-injure himself if he is the one out there, that just makes it tough. Joe Flacco, if for some reason he is the guy that's on the field, I would have him right in that same range with Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, guys that have matchups that really could come through. We don't know for sure which one will, but he would be right there in that mix.
As things stand, as I'm checking our ranks right now, I have Anthony Richardson, QB 11, Dwain a little bit lower at QB 14. So when it does come to guys like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Dak Prescott, like Sam Darnold, that's kind of the range we're putting Richardson in. We're not giving him that usual kind of dual threat bump into the top 10 because, to Dwain's point, not exactly sure how healthy he is, and accordingly can't quite trust him the same way. So it does suck, Dwain, that this is finally the good matchup we were supposed to be able to take advantage of with Richardson. Looked really good in that limited action against the Steelers last week. Hopefully, again, he's able to turn things around. Otherwise, I'm going to have to buy a bike here and get moving before too long. Dwain, the other quarterback notes, not a ton going on, but we'll note that Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers did get in a full practice on Thursday after being limited on Wednesday, so knee issue not really of a concern ahead of that London Sunday morning matchup. Also have Jordan Love practicing in full. First time he took all the first team reps since week 1, so great news for the Packers franchise QB there. And then, of course, as we are obligated to say every week, Russell Wilson still limited with that calf injury. We are fully expecting Justin Fields to start ahead of that Sunday night clash against the Cowboys defense that is all kinds of banged up with DeMarcus Lawrence already ruled out, and Micah Parsons probably going to be out with that ankle injury as well. So, Dwain, let's go ahead and move on to our running backs because there is quite a bit to get to here. Starting with the same team we just talked about, Colts RB1 Jonathan Taylor, unfortunately not practicing this week with an ankle injury. As someone who owns a lot of fantasy teams alongside you, Dwain, we are betting pretty big on Trey Sermon this week. So if you wouldn't mind, can you give us some good old Sermon propaganda? Again, in a pretty good matchup against the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have to because we have a lot of injuries in some cases. So, Trey Sermon was the sicko start in yesterday's episode, so you guys can go back and check that out. But look, we don't have a super large sample to reference, Ian, because Jonathan Taylor over these first 4 games has taken 75% of the snaps. So it's not like there's a lot left there to really say, okay, like who's going to be the next man up? But it has been Trey Sermon. He's been the guy working ahead of Tyler Goodson. So I think that Sermon is a lock for probably 50 to 55% of the rushing attempts. But he could also get 65, 70%. But even if he's just at that 50% range, Ian, as long as he doesn't lose all the passing down work to Tyler Goodson, that's going to make him a borderline running back 2 for you. So when you start dealing with bye weeks, we've got the injuries that we've got going on. Trey Sermon is a guy that's going to be in more lineups than not if you're playing in a 12-team league. And you guys have to start 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 2 flex, or 3 wide receivers and 2 flex. Those sort of leagues, like Trey Sermon's going to be in your lineup. So I'm looking at him as a guy that I don't want to oversell. We don't want to say, oh, God, he's going to come out here just because he has a good matchup against the Jaguars. He's going to be a running back 1 because there is enough uncertainty with his utilization that it could go a different way. But I am comfortable enough to recommend him as a running back 2.
In terms of how the handcuffs go, I mean, we saw Kenneth Walker miss time and Zach Charbonnet every down role where, didn't necessarily crush in both of his appearances, but was out there for the full game. Also, situation in Houston where with Joe Mixon, Damian Pierce out, Cam Akers comes in as a bit more game script dependent, had to cede a lot of pass down work to Dario Ogunbowale, for example, when the Texans fell behind against the Vikings. I do think Sermon falls a bit more into the Cam Akers side of things, Dwain, where,
I agree.
Again, I have him ranked RB21, you have him ranked RB22. He's ahead of the Bengals running backs. We had him ahead of the Buccaneers running backs, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams. Like, we're starting him ahead of those guys. But once we look at guys like Travis Etienne, even, Devin A. Chan, Chuba Hubbard, Josh Jacobs, amongst others, yes, that is where we are going to slightly fade Trey Sermon.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Jaguars matchup is really good. If you go look at our defense versus position tool, the DVP tool over at FantasyLife, where we actually normalize, what these defenses are giving up versus the teams they've played, the average for their position. So taking the Jaguars 5.5 fantasy points in a PPR, that's the boost you're getting to the opposing running back room whenever you play against the Jaguars, which is the 4th most. The Bills right now are first because of Derrick Henry last week at 8.7. Then you've got the Panthers at 6.6. Then you've got the Dolphins, and right after that, you've got the Jaguars. So it is a really good matchup. If the guy comes out and does get 65% of the carries, he will have a chance for a running back 1 finish. We just don't know for sure what his workload's going to look like.
Talk about a team that looks ready just to roll over, Dwain. Those Jacksonville Jaguars would not be a group I'd be betting heavily on this weekend. All right, we also have Giants running back Devin Singletary, someone I was going to mention as a surefire start ahead of Sermon, but Dwain, he has not practiced this week with a groin injury. So, hey, we did hear from Jordan Renan that maybe he has a better chance of playing than Malik Nabers, but again, can't get out there on the practice field, not looking good for Sunday. So certainly a matchup against the Seahawks that isn't exactly the easiest in the world, albeit we did see the Lions expose them to a decent extent there last week on Monday Night Football. So, Dwain, if we do not see Devin Singletary, because I think we agree, low end, borderline, RB2 if he's active, how do you see the split going between Tyron Tracy and Eric Gray?
Yeah, so far this year, Singletary's pretty much dominated, similar to what we talked about with Jonathan Taylor. He's got a 72% snap share, but this one I think is a little bit more clear, to be honest, than the Trey Sermon one, because 23% of the snaps have gone to Tyrone Tracy, only 6% to Eric Gray. And so we've seen Tyrone Tracy actually work his way into a role where they want to have him on the field more. So I think probably 60% of the rushing attempts are going to go to Tyrone Tracy here. And I think there's less risk, Ian, to him having to come off the field on passing downs, because that's really where they've tried to feature him. He's got a 25% route participation versus 44% for Devin Singletary. And this was theoretically one of the things we liked about Tyrone Tracy if you were playing in a league that was deep enough where you need to throw these late round running back darts, is he could have that 3-down skill set, right? Coming out of college, he was much more of a receiver, has never really handled a large workload, as a running back. He didn't transition to that position until later in his career. So there's a little bit of question mark. Like, could they split this 50-50 between him and Eric Gray, like on the ground? Like, I think that's a possibility, but I really do think Tracy has those passing downs locked down. And that means if he does somehow get 60-65% of the rushing attempts, like, that's something we can really get behind, because that is insulated from any kind of game script. And we might not have Malik Nabers this weekend. Like, that could be a lot of targets for Tyrone Tracy. So if we find out Devin Singletary is out, I'm going to prefer Tyrone Tracy over Trey Sermon.
Would that be a situation where we're getting Tracy actually ahead of guys like Travis Etienne, maybe even Josh Jacobs, guys in split backfields, or a little bit too far?
I think that's too far. And Jacobs has got a really great matchup. Like the splits have not been good the last 3 games, but he's got like such a juicy matchup that if they just decide to feed him, man, he's going to score 30. So I want to be careful and not go too far. But I think right there around Travis Etienne, Etienne's got a really good matchup as well. So I would say probably end up around running back 20, 19. So we'll see what happens today at practice. But Tyrone Tracy, I mean, it's a guy that I already mentioned to my son last night because he had a trade waiting to go through, so he couldn't pick up Eckler off the wire because Brian Robinson, we'll talk about him in a minute. And I was like, dude, is Tyrone Tracy there? And he was like, yeah. So, yeah, I definitely recommend picking him up, and he's probably going to be someone you can start if you're battling injuries.
We'll go ahead and move right on to Brian Robinson with that. He has not practiced this week, dealing with a knee injury, setting up Austin Eckler, Dwain, someone who, of course, missed last week with a concussion, but did practice in full on Thursday and is fully expecting to suit up this Sunday against the Browns defense that, let's face it, has not looked like the same sort of world-beating, league-best EPA per play group that we saw in 2023. So if we do see Robinson out, wouldn't necessarily expect Eckler to completely dominate the backfield. Jeremy McNichols has played well as a third back, but that said, Dwain, with just how ridiculously great this Washington offense is clicking, Austin Eckler versus all those other guys we just named, man, he might have an argument to be ahead of him.
Yeah, man, I would play Eckler over all the guys that we just named. Like it's kind of
not
it's
Jacobs.
An interesting.
That's it.
Yeah, not Jacob. No. When I mean Trey Sermon and over Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah.
I would definitely put him above those because Eckler's a guy that they know, Ian. He's handled enough of a full-time role in the past. We know that he's going to get his snaps, right? I don't think he's at much of a risk of us looking up and be like, wow, didn't see that coming. Dude only got 30% of the snaps or only got 40%, of the passing downs. Like, I think he's probably going to be around half the carries. We've not really seen anybody truly load up Austin Eckler, honestly, ever. Like, we've seen 1 year where I think he got to around 60% of the rushing attempts. So I could see him being 50, 55% of the rushing attempts, but he's going to get all of the passing down work. And I do think that they'll scheme things up for him. In the screen game, I think that they'll get him some mismatches against linebackers, running some Texas routes out there, Hartitz. So, yeah, I really like Austin Eckler. And I think there's a chance, because no one has stepped forward in the Commanders besides Terry McLaurin to really be that number 2. He could easily be the number 2 receiver for this team on the week. And Jaden Daniels has shown, even though he likes to scramble, he likes to run, he's willing to use his running backs in the pass game. So I would really like Austin Eckler this week. So that'd probably put him, we're getting jumbled here because I haven't had to officially adjust all these ranks due to the injuries. Trey Sermon's already been moved up, but I would definitely put him ahead of Tyrone Tracy. Probably, I might actually move him above Travis Etienne. I think that would be in play. Same range right there with Etienne, given Etienne's also battling an injury, and Tank Bigsby just flat out looks like way better than Etienne right now.
I'll tell you what, Dwain, I'd start him ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. And I think, can't believe I'm saying this, I think I'd take Austin Eckler over Devon Achane.
Oh, man. Wow. Now you're getting provocative, as you like to say, Hartitz. I don't think, man, I want to sit here and say I don't think I could do that. He has looked good, and here's the other thing. We could get Raheem Mostert back this week. Hopefully this year we do get Raheem Mostert back. But he's got the chest injury that he's been battling through. Mike McDaniel said, we're not going to rush it. There's no point because you're getting your wheels blown off. But, I mean, the moment Mostert's back, the one thing we have going for us right now with Achane is volume. And if he loses that, then Achane, I mean, honestly, drops down to low-end running back 2 status. So it will depend on the Mostert thing for me. If Mostert is out, I'm still going to lean Achane over Austin Eckler, but I think you do have a good argument. It's a way better offense right now, so maybe I'm just being an idiot. Well, you guys will have to check the ranks and see if I actually end up. Hartitz is in my head now. We'll see if I agree with him.
Certainly going to be a top 15-ish running back, I think, across the board, which accordingly should get Eckler in far more fantasy lineups than not. One more situation to go through, Dwain, at the running back position. We do have Browns running back Nick Chubb back out there on the field practicing a limited fashion this week. So we'll see if he's able to get out there by Sunday. If he's not able to, then yes, it will be the Jerome Ford show once again. That said, though, we also have Pierre Strong Jr. returning to practice with that hamstring injury. He has missed a lot of time since week 1. And low-key, Dwain, the practice window for Nyheim Hines has opened up as well. So as much as Jerome Ford has given us some nice, utilization over these past 2 weeks, and as great as that matchup is against Washington, I am a little bit worried about him again holding on to this role if we do get the return of potentially 3 different competitors in that backfield.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I doubt Hines is returning this week, but we don't know for sure, so we would have to see that. At least this weekend, I think Ford's going to be okay because we know Nick Chubb's not coming back. But once you get through this game, hopefully Ford goes off. You really need to sell high, and you got to do it quickly, guys, because these platforms and things that everybody play on, it's not like it used to be. Ian, you used to be able to go make a move like that, but now, like, you know, where everybody plays is so great. There's all these news blurbs all attached to these players. So the first thing you're going to see next week is every news blurb next to, Jerome Ford is going to be, hey, go sell high on this guy. So the guy you're trying to sell him high to, that player is also going to read that blurb, because they're just going to click on Jerome Ford's name and it's going to be right there. And that's actually a good thing, right, for the competitive nature of fantasy leagues. I prefer the old bare knuckle leagues where people didn't get all the information fed to them personally. But I'm just, old man yelling at the clouds. What do I know, Hartitz?
Once we do get Chubb back, though, Dwain, which again, not expecting to be this week by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly going to be a wait and see scenario. Yeah. That said, I mean, I think they're going to give him every chance to, be the guy. And if we have learned anything this year, it's that sometimes, not every time, but as we saw with J.K. Dobbins, modern medical science, Dwain, can be a miracle.
Yeah, and be careful also with Jerome Ford. You don't want to just give him away for nothing. This is going to be more of a split early on, to your point, and I think that Chubb's going to ramp up. He'll get an opportunity to take over most of that early down work. But if Chubb's not looking good, if Chubb's not feeling right, if Chubb has a setback, Jerome Ford will suddenly be most likely the guy that we're leaning into every week. Like, I think he's shown that he can do that. He showed it last year, and they kind of kept that short yardage work away from him. They gave that to Kareem Hunt. This year, they expanded the role. I mean, it's a young player growing, in the NFL. So I do think that the Browns trust him. Nyheim Hines, like I said, wouldn't worry me too much. Deonta Foreman, we've already been playing with him. So be careful with Ford. You want to sell high, but remember, guys, don't just see the word sell. See the word high as well. I get some of your screenshots, and you guys are forgetting the second half of these things. When I say buy low, it means don't forget the low. You don't want to go buy high. And when you sell high, you want to sell high, not sell low. So be careful with that.
Offensive line getting a little healthier. Deshaun Watson coming off arguably his best game in a Browns uniform. Bar wasn't high. I get it. Yeah, man. Yeah. Maybe better days ahead in Cleveland. You guys could imagine. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Just some other quick rapid-fire RB notes. We'll say that ahead of that Monday night matchup, Alvin Kamara is practicing in a limited fashion, but he did so last week and played through the questionable tag as well, so fully expecting him to be out there. Also potentially returning from IR soon, Kendre Miller, Dwain, from that hamstring injury. And Dennis Allen actually said he looked good in practice. Is this a cry for help? I've never heard Dennis Allen say anything even remotely nice about Kendre, so good to hear for him there. Not someone that I would expect to be split in the backfield anytime soon, but again, hopefully at least the former third-round pick can keep on moving up that depth chart. Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker was full on Wednesday and then limited on Thursday with that oblique injury. Not too concerned because the Seahawks just generally have pretty wonky practice reports, but certainly something to keep an eye on there. And I would not be cutting Zach Charbonnet because we do know how good of a handcuff he can be. Dwain mentioned Raheem Mostert still practicing in a limited fashion with that chest injury. Meanwhile, Jeff Wilson is practicing in full. Had that weird pregame knee issue last week. So it does appear that the Dolphins getting back to full strength soon in that backfield. We do have both Jaguars running backs in Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby limited with shoulder injuries. I will say last week, Tank was limited all week and didn't even have a designation going to the weekend. So certainly expecting both Etienne and Bigsby to be out there in their usual roles. Also, Chiefs running back Kareem Hunt dealing with a shoulder injury. He was limited to start the week as well. No major reason for concern, but just something to keep an eye on. And we'll also be monitoring Clyde Edwards-Helaire's potential return to action. Guys that are not looking good and have not been practicing this week, Texans running backs Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce once again setting Cam Akers up for not the world's most fantasy-friendly role, but at least someone that we should see flirting with that 15 opportunity mark. Also, the Steelers running backs in Jalen Warren and Cordero Patterson not practicing, really setting up for a nice game for Najee Harris against that banged up Cowboys defense. Raiders running back Zamir White got downgraded to a DNP on Thursday with that groin injury. Could be good news for Alexander Madison. Miles Sanders that had an illness that kept him out of practice on Thursday. Could be even more work for Chuba Hubbard. And Broncos running back Tyler Beatty continues to be out with that back injury. So that was running backs, everyone. And we'll be right on to wide receivers after this quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action. Use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwain. So you sent me a funny message yesterday as we were going through our lineup saying that if Malik Nabers is out, you are going to jump off a bridge. Now, you followed up that the bridge by your house is only 4 feet drop, so I'm not too worried about, the safety and long-term health of you. But yes, man, not looking good for the Giants wide receiver one. A long shot to play per Jordan Renan out there, has not practiced all week with that concussion. Wan'Dale Robinson also limited with a heel injury. So certainly, Dwain, a passing game that we don't think too highly of from an efficiency standpoint. Now, looking like they're going to be without their #1 target getter, and their #2 target earner might be banged up as well.
Yeah, man. Malik Nabers at a 39% target share this year. Wan'Dale Robinson at a 28%. Kind of lost in the shuffle because of how much attention we pay to Malik Nabers. Now, look, Wan'Dale, I get it. You can call him Spamdell. You can call him Scamdell. Whatever you want to call him. He's operating underneath the defense. Defenses are trying to give that extra coverage to Malik Nabers and try to not get their wheels blown off. But still, the dude's playing his role on the offense. And I don't know if you ever did the research, Ian, but that's got to be the highest right now of any 2 wide receivers or any 2 receivers, period, including tight ends, whatever, on a team. We're talking 40% and another 30%, almost 70% of the targets just going to these 2 players. So if for some reason Nabers is out and Robinson is in, he's just going to do his normal thing. You can't really ask him to do more, Ian, than what he's been doing. He can't suddenly turn into a deep threat. He's more of an underneath guy. I think the question is, what do we do with that next position? I will say, real quick on Wan'Dale before I move on from him, only rostered 42% of the time right now in Yahoo leagues. So over half the time he's available, and a lot of people that are listening to this show right now. So he's a guy to remember if you are hurting at wide receiver. But let's talk about the other guys on this roster, and is there anything that you can do with them? Darius Slayton is the next guy in line, Ian. He has been the other player out there the most. He's got an 84% route participation this season. So that's good enough for second on the team, actually, behind Malik Nabers. And we have seen Darius Slayton in the past. We're not claiming he's going to suddenly turn into this high-end target earner. You guys know, if you listen to us, that doesn't just suddenly happen. You can get a rando game here or there. But he's a guy that's shown, Ian, he can be in an offense that's depleted like 20%, and he gets some deep shots. And so he could give you a chance to come through on a couple of those. He could come through with a touchdown, not last season, but the season before. Slayton had a nice little 4 or 5 game run where he was giving you, low end wide receiver 2 production. So if you are in a sicko league, guys, you're in a league where, and if you're in a sicko league, because it means you would be considering Darius Slayton. That's how you know. But he is a guy that if you're dealing with injuries, you could get him into your wide receiver 3 spot or into a flex spot if you're really hurting.
We'll say implied team totals, which you can calculate just by taking every team's Vegas spread and their over-under. Yeah, it's really bad. Only the Dolphins and Raiders are implied to score fewer points than the Giants this week. So just want to be careful, because sometimes we talk about these situations and we end up speaking a lot about guys like Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. Don't get that confused, though, with them being actively people we want to get in those fantasy lineups. The only guy in New York that qualifies for that is Malik Nabers, and we accordingly hope he gets better soon. Dwain, another situation that we have talked plenty about this week, Devontae Adams with that hamstring injury, not practicing, not expecting to play, not even expecting to be in Las Vegas for that much longer. I do wonder if he's going to bring that Taco Bell guy with him to his next home or not. So wait and see on that situation. That said, as excited as people might be to pick up Trey Tucker or Jacoby Myers maybe off your waiver wire, yeah, Dwayne, not looking like the spot necessarily this week where we want to be turning to them if we can help it.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be facing the Broncos. So we have an offense that we don't have a ton of, number one, to start, the offense. we don't have a ton of confidence in. And now you're going to put him up against a defense that, has been really good. They've shut down really everyone that they've played against. They've played against some really good wide receiver ones. They've shut down Mike Evans. They've shut down Garrett Wilson. They shut down, was it DK Metcalf? I can't remember now. There's George Pickens got him, but it was a sheesh. So his box score didn't look good, but George Pickens did get him. So Jacoby Myers, it just makes it tough. We know we're going to get this extra volume. I have no doubt like he's going to get some targets, but what are those targets really going to be worth in this offense this weekend? So I've got him right now as my wide receiver 45. Ian, you're a little bit higher, wide receiver 39, but I think that's basically it. Wide receiver 4 territory for Jacoby Myers. So don't go out of your way to get him into your lineup just because you're like, oh, Devontae Adams isn't there. And then looking at Trey Tucker, I would say he's one tier below that. I will say with Tucker, the interesting thing is I do think any one play, like he could come up with enough to get you there. Where it's Jacoby, it's kind of like you need that methodical day. You need all the targets. Yeah. It's all got to be working out. And really we like that in most situations. When you're playing against the Broncos, though, I will say I'm going to keep Jacoby Myers ranked higher. Trey Tucker, though, if he came through with a big play, maybe he helps you out. He's a wide receiver 5 this week, so you can't get excited.
It'd be nice to see what should be the real number 1 receiving option in Vegas. Brock Bowers get more involved, particularly with Michael Mayer once again not practicing due to a personal matter. We'll see what happens there, though. Dwain, inexplicable to me that with everything going on in Vegas, they've only got Brock Bowers 3 touches in each of the last 2 weeks. Feed your best players to football, guys, especially when your real best player isn't even out there. Could have a return of one of the best players on the Houston Texans, though, Dwain. Tank Dell, been practicing a limited fashion after missing week 4 with that chest injury. So as we saw, though, in the first couple weeks of the season, did seem to be Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and then Tank Dell in that order. And just from having peeped some of these games, oddly using them in more of a gadget capacity than I think we saw last season. So with Tank Dell, Dwain, being someone who I know you were telling people to buy low on after the first week or two, how are you feeling about his potential return against a Bills defense that is a bit banged up?
Well, the number one thing we care about, right, is a player's talent, and we know that Tank Dell has that. We know that Tank Dell has the ability to really score fantasy points. It's nothing to do with him as to why they're not coming. It has to do with he's playing on a team with other really good players. But we do have a Texans passing attack, in my opinion, Ian, that still hasn't found its stride. And maybe part of that is to not keep Tank Dell in a freaking gadget role. How about you actually let this guy do some things? But it's not terrible. He's got a 28% air yard share in the games that he's played. So I mean, he's still getting looks down the field. His average depth of target on the season is 12.7. So it's not all been gimmicky. He's also one better ball away from potentially having, a 50+ yard touchdown already on his resume for the weekend. So Tank Dell, when I look at him, Ian, like he's going to be in that low-end wide receiver 3 conversation, but it is boom bust. Here's what I'm going to say. Look, Nico Collins, like I think we just have to respect it at this point. We really like Nico Collins anyway. Like we loved him last year. We liked him this year. He's a guy that we told you is going to be a wide receiver 1, but he's kind of ascended to that new plane, man. He's ascended like up to where Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and those guys are, and that is going to be a limiting factor. Unfortunately for Tank Dell. I think he's still going to come through with his big games, but it's just going to be more boom bust because I think at this point, and we've got to look at Nico Collins. Dude's sitting there right now with a 29% target share. I mean, that's elite. He's got a 45% air yard share. Last week, they finally just let him cook the whole game, gave him a 98% route participation. Now, part of that was because you didn't have Tank Dell available. So I think Tank Dell, is a guy that could still give you a 25 fantasy point game. But there's just probably going to be more of a chance of giving you 5 than what we thought when we first began the season. We saw him as a boom bust player anyway, but I just worry there's a little bit more of the bust mixed in, and not as many booms with the way Nico's playing.
Accordingly, hardly a must-start option for us this week. Some examples of players we have ranked ahead of Tank Dell: Xavier Worthy, Rashid Shaheed, Wan'Dale Robinson by a hair, Michael Pittman, Christian Kirk, and Jordan Addison, amongst others. That said, we do still have Tank Dell ahead of guys like Xavier Legette, Josh Downs, Jacoby Myers, Juwan Jennings, and even Keenan Allen, amongst other players. So keep an eye on that. Again, just has been limited, so we would like to see that full practice. Hopefully no injury designation going to the weekend. At a minimum, though, hopefully we do get a high-scoring affair between the Texans and the Bills, arguably the game of the week. One more wide receiver situation to get to, Dwayne. We do have Packers wide receiver Christian Watson with that ankle, not expecting to play, although it does look like he avoided an IR stint, so hopefully back sooner rather than later. And also on Thursday, we had Romeo Doubs miss practice due to a personal matter. Hope everything is going on okay there, but when asked if Doubs would return on Friday, Matt LaFleur didn't exactly give the most resounding endorsement, just said, yeah, I would hope so. So, Dwayne, look, it is Jaden Reed's world, and we're all just living in it. This man is number one in yards per reception this year, or yards per target, excuse me, and then also number one in yards per carry if you want to finagle the qualifiers enough. So truly a great player, but my God, man, if Dontavian Wicks couldn't run any hotter without Christian Watson, I mean, are you gonna have Wicks as the top 15 wide receiver if Dobbs is out too?
He'll be close. I mean, I've already got him as a low-end wide receiver 2. So if Dobbs is out, I don't see how I don't at least get him to mid-range wide receiver 2 status. We'll talk about Wicks a little bit more here in our bold calls in just a little bit. But I just want to let people know, available, Ian, he's only rostered 59%. I say only. He's rostered 60% of the time. But he should not be available 40% of the time. Like, he just should not be available this much in fantasy league. So I know a lot of you are listening and going, not in my league. What league are these people playing in? We don't know, but live vicariously through them. And let's all encourage you. If you see Dontavian Wicks is available on your waiver wire, you've got to go pick him up right now. And there's a really good chance he's going to fit into your starting lineup this weekend. This is a guy that can absolutely crush. We've got a really good spot as far as the matchup goes. And we've got a situation where it could be condensed down to really him and the other guy you just mentioned, Jaden Reed.
Some examples of guys that we have Wicks ranked ahead of this week: DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, Brian Thomas Jr., Tyreek Hill. We're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we have to. Tyreek Hill, man, look. Yeah, I mean, Tyreek Hill is like, he's a boom bust wide receiver 3 until we get to him. Like, that's where we're at. It's a sad day. Tyreek told us back in the day that he can play with anybody throwing him the ball. Apparently, there are some limitations to that.
Snoop Huntley, that's where we draw the line, apparently. Okay, so Deontay Johnson, though, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, those are guys that we're still going to be having ahead of Wicks. So again, though, Dwayne, I mean, I'm looking at your ranks right now over at FantasyLife.com. If we do get Dobbs added to the equation where he is out as well, I mean, Chris Olave is wide receiver 15, Deontay is 16, Diggs is 17. That's probably the group we're moving Wicks up into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the highest right now. Well, you and I are close. You vowed to stay one spot ahead of me, but you're failing right now. I'm at 20. You're at 21. Charch is at 22. Waz is at 24. Waz is typically a little bit more conservative on some of these guys than we are, and he's already all in. And Friedman has him at 30, but Friedman puts his ranks in like on Tuesday, Wednesday, and he doesn't update them again until today. So we'll see where Friedman ends up. But yeah, looking at this list, for me, I would be moving Dontavian Wicks. Probably, I would get him in over Ayuk for sure.
Wow.
I think right around Chris Olave. I would start him over Chris Olave. I would start him. Man, what about Deontay Johnson against the Bears? The Bears are a pretty tough matchup, and Deontay's dealing with an injury.
I think I go
that's the spot, man. I can't go higher. Like, I've got Amari at 13 this week. I'm not going over him because he's playing the Commanders. Like, that could be 200 yards. And then we're into Garrett Wilson, Drake. He's right there.
I'd even play him over Amari. I just think with the way that Browns offense has not earned any of the benefit of the doubt. I know they're getting the best matchup in the world, but is Washington that much easier of a layup than the Rams? Just something to think about. So good options either way. But close. Yeah, guys. Yeah.
But that would make him a borderline wide receiver 1, Ian.
Yeah, that's where we are. Hopefully you got him on the waiver wire. A few more wide receiver injuries, guys, before we get to tight end. Just want to say that Chris Olave, good to go with that hamstring issue, fully expecting to have his usual role on Monday night against the Chiefs. Dolphins getting some backups in there. Odell Beckham Jr. practicing in full. Malik Washington also returned to the practice field. Not that it really matters, but, had to get that out there. Panthers wide receiver Deontay Johnson might be listed as questionable in your app, but Dave Canales has said that absolutely he expects him to play and also doesn't see a trade happening. So good news for the Panthers wide receiver 1. Also also have Gabe Davis, Kendrick Bourne, limited in practice. We'll see what happens there. Guys not looking so good, though. KJ Osborne for the Patriots. Khalil Shakur apparently dealing with a high ankle injury, has not practiced all week. Could be a chance for Curtis Samuel to live up to that offseason contract. Brandon Cooks out for 1 to 3 weeks, and Noah Brown got downgraded with that groin injury. Could be good news for eliminated Zacchaeus, Luke McCaffrey, and Diami Brown, amongst others. And finally, the Chiefs did place Rashee Rice on IR. So haven't heard if it's of the season-ending variety just yet, but at a minimum, going to be missing these next 4 weeks of action. So that takes us to tight end, Dwain. And while we will not be getting TJ Hockenson back this week, it does sound like a week 7 return is in his potential range of outcomes. So good news for Hockenson, someone that I could see breaking into our top 5 sooner rather than later once he does return.
Yeah, I mean, even if Hockenson is like 70% at the beginning, Ian, we like the offense that we're dealing with. We've got Kevin O'Connell. We've got Sam Darnold really balling out. We obviously know Justin Jefferson's the number 1 there. But in an offense that we really love, you just mentioned it, with Green Bay, being attached to that Green Bay offense versus being attached to a Cleveland offense like Amari Cooper. A lot of that same thought process goes into TJ Hockenson, and things have just been so rough at the tight end position. It's not going to take a lot. And so I think we got to be a little bit conservative with TJ Hockenson at the beginning because they might have him at a 50% route participation. See, bruh agrees with me. Is that Lily or bruh? I don't know who agrees with me.
That is Lily.
Somebody agrees. Lily's usually much more bold than that. She usually doesn't speak up when I say you want to take something easy. She usually jumps in whenever I'm all in on something. But I do think it's going to pretty quickly happen, Ian, where within 2 to 3 games, we're going to be like, okay, TJ Hockenson, top 6 tight end the rest of the way. Even if he's not, again, at 100% of what he was because of how bad the tight end position has been. But we just love the Vikings, man. Is there anything we don't like about the Vikings offense right now? It's really good.
Freaking amazing, man. And the number 1 defense in the NFL by certain advanced metrics as well. Maybe more on that a little bit later. Jaguars tight end Evan Ingram has been limited in practice, but tentatively is expected to return from that hamstring injury because he didn't practice all last week, so should be moving on forward. So, Dwain, hey, man, dude had over 140 targets last year as a tight end. I mean, he's certainly someone that we're going to be having in that top 12 conversation. The problem is just that really, other than Brian Thomas Jr. and to a slightly lesser extent Christian Kirk, haven't seen really anybody in this offense work with all that much consistency in Fantasyland.
Yeah, and to be honest, Ingram's never separated whenever he's had the other 2 targets on the field last year, whether that was Calvin Ridley and Kirk, or this year we're going to have to see what happens. Brian Thomas Jr. stepping right into what Calvin Ridley was doing, honestly looking a little bit better than what Calvin Ridley did, even though he's only a rookie. So hat tip to BTJ there. But Evan Ingram, the big challenge is we've got a quarterback right now that can't throw for 200 yards, and we're going to have to split this up 3 ways. Having said all that, we just talked about how nasty tight end is. So at least give me a player that we know is talented. And so, yes, Evan Ingram's going to immediately step back into a top 12 spot here in the tight end ranks. If you've got him on your roster and he's active, you're most likely going to have him in your lineup. You got a really nice matchup here against the Colts, giving up 31.8 fantasy points to opposing pass catchers. That's the 5th most in the league in a PPR setting, 260 yards almost per game through the air. So there's enough here that you could squint and be like, okay, maybe this is the game where Trevor Lawrence throws for, can we get 225, Trevor? Could we get 225? Give me 225, and then maybe we could get Evan Ingram, to be like the tight end 9 this weekend. And a lot of us might actually be elated with that, Ian. So, yeah, definitely back into the top 12, but we need Trevor Lawrence. I know it sounds like a broken record, to take a step forward for all these guys to be able to be people that we trust in our fantasy lineups.
It is a good point, though, man, where I feel like we've been focusing a lot on how good of a matchup this is for the Colts, and it is and everything, but also on the other way around, things are looking good. Bottom 5 defenses this year and just total fantasy points allowed throughout every position: Jaguars, Commanders, Rams, Colts, and Panthers. So anytime you can target those units, life is pretty good.
And I did real quick on that, Ian. I did some offseason research, just super fast here, where I looked at some things where Vegas would get the lines wrong. Like, what were things where Vegas would have the game totals off? And one of them was when 2 really bad defenses faced each other, and what that did for those offenses, allowing a potential shootout. So just saying, guys, you can use that information however you want.
Bet that over. That's all I heard, Dwain. It's life's too short to do anything otherwise. So just final few notes on tight ends. Trey McBride, good to go. Cole Kmet, good to go. David Njoku did have a DMP on Thursday, but that apparently was part of the plan. Still seems a little unsure for Sunday, though. Not looking as good. George Kittle hasn't practiced this week, although Shanahan did say he does not need to practice in order to play. Also, Taysom Hill dealing with some rib fractures, expecting to miss some time. Michael Mayer, once again, could be out. Good news for Brock Bowers. Luke Musgrave dealing with an ankle injury, which makes more sense given Tucker Kraft's rise up the depth chart. But again, could be good news again for at least week 5. And the Panthers tight ends all kinds of banged up with Tommy Tremble not practicing and Ian Thomas returning from IR. So maybe, just maybe, a little Jatavian Sanders stream for you true sickos out there. But guys, those are the main injuries. And now we're getting to everyone's favorite segment of the week, bold predictions. Dwain, we've been on fire. We had the caveat that we're going to miss a lot of these, but so far this year, man, we are winning more than we have let go. 8-4 now on the season. You gave us Brian Robinson and also Stephon Diggs putting together big games last week. I got us Justin
Jaden Reed.
Fields.
We switched it to Jaden Reed. We switched it to Jaden Reed, who smashed. Yeah, Diggs came through, but Reed smashed.
Reed did indeed smash, as did Justin Fields. Not so much with T. Higgins, although I will say the volume was there, Dwain. And given this Ravens pass funnel defense, maybe I was a week too early on that one. So new week, new us, and I'm going to kick things off with hopefully us finally getting a boom game out of a certain wide receiver one. Brandon Ayuk, give me 7 catches, 125 yards, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns. Dwain, we've seen this 49ers offense score at least 35 points in each of their last 4 meetings against the Cardinals. I do think the time is now to see Ayuk really put together that boom performance that we know he is still capable of. So give me Ayuk going off. You have a much, lesser highly ranked wide receiver taking advantage, though, of another good matchup. Talk about Jerry Jeudy in this matchup against the Commanders.
Yeah, and really, if we had thought this through before the season, we would be like scaling these on points, right? There's certain things that you say, okay, fine, it's going to hit, and it feels really good, but it's like worth 1 point. This would be worth like 5 points if it hits. Yeah. And maybe I'm just getting a little cocky because we're doing so good, but I just want to say with Jerry Jeudy, man, over these last few games, things have really been pretty solid for him, like underlying utilization wise. Okay, look, we get it. It's the Cleveland Browns offense, but we know they're going up against the Commanders. But when we look at Jerry Jeudy, target shares in over the last 4 weeks, 20%, 19%, 19%, 30%. So he's got a 22% target share on the year. He gets looks down the field. He's got 36% of the air yards. Utilization score is really sitting right there in that wide receiver 3 boom bust range. Well, we get a boom bust matchup against the Commanders. So it's really, look, will it happen for sure? I don't know, but I benched Darnell Mooney last night for Jerry Jeudy, so I really need this to happen, Mr. Jerry Jeudy. I do have conviction around this one. I'm saying I can't say it's going to happen for sure, but it was enough that I put him into my lineup over another guy that I like in Darnell Mooney. So I've got him for 105 yards and a touchdown. From a fantasy perspective, just real quick, Ian, to make sure people remember in case they've forgotten, the Washington Commanders give the biggest fantasy boost to opposing wide receivers, 8.7. fantasy points per game to the and a boost to the opposing wide receiver room. So yeah, big weekend potential here for Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, you already heard about Amari Cooper earlier. He's almost a wide receiver 1 for me this week.
Another defense we get a big boost from is that LA Rams Aaron Donald-less group. And accordingly, Dwain and I both want to get in on this one. I have Romeo Doubs, a.k.a. the lead target getter in this Packers offense, and the man, Dwain, that Jordan Love said he trusts with his wedding ring, going for over 100 yards and scoring not once, twice. But yeah, hopefully we do see him play in the first place because, again, he was not practicing due to personal reasons on Thursday. So if we don't see Doubs, I'll go ahead and throw Josh Downs out there as another player that I could see going off. We'll say 20-plus PPR points. Dwain, though, you are riding a bit more chalk on this one. Dontavian Wicks, someone we've already spoken plenty about.
Yeah, we say chalk, but I mean, when somebody's available, 40% of the time in Yahoo leagues, that's not very chalky. We are very excited about where Dontavian Wicks is, and this is assuming Romeo Doubs plays. But yeah, I've got him for 115 yards. I got him for 2 touchdowns. And when we just look at the plays, I know you just said the target earner number 1 for Dobbs, but everything, we really got to look at the rates on these things. Who's on the field, who's off the field. So over the last 2 years, when Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs have been on the field together, 25% target share for Mr. Wicks, along with Ian, 520 yards and 5 touchdowns. We've got 363 and 2 for Dobbs, and he's got a 21% target share. So both have been good. But Wicks has really been the guy that's been the leader, honestly, really in almost every scenario when the guy's been on the field. We'll see if that holds up. It's a small sample, but we've got a matchup that we like here. So, yeah, I'm in on Wicks. We already talked about it. If Dobbs is out, borderline wide receiver 1. Dobbs is playing. We've got him as a low-end wide receiver 2.
And by the way, if Dobbs does join Watson on the sideline, Bo Melton, for you real sickos out there, probably is sliding into 3 wide receiver sets. So with that, now that we got that Bo Melton mention off our chest, Dwain, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. And we'll be back Sunday night breaking down all the happenings of hopefully an eventful Week 5. So for Dwain, for producer Kelsey, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.